head of performance at the School of Theater at Ohio University. And the performance area encompasses the MFA in acting and 2 BFAs now, a BFA in acting and an only 2-year-old BFA in musical theater. At this unique time to be teaching acting online, our programs are growing. So we feel really lucky to have more and more students all the time. I'm here to launch the evening with Jonathan Freeman, and I wanted to speak a little bit about him before I pass these words off to our Dean, Matthew Shaftel. Jonathan and I met in 2000 at a rehearsal that began at Lincoln Center for the great American comedy, You Can't Take It With You. And we opened a beautiful and hilarious production together at the Bay Street Theater on Long Island. And Jonathan was, believe it or not, my ballet master in that production. And we had a great time. But if I knew that he had attended Ohio University, it wouldn't have registered because I was not yet a faculty member. And a mere 2 years later, I was at Ohio University. And my life began to intersect with Jonathan's again at the late great Monomoy Theater on Cape Cod, where we encountered each other. And then Jonathan returned as a distinguished alumni. And it's long overdue that we should have Jonathan back and engaging with our students more. So he has already generously spent a week with many of our students this fall, from sophomores through MFAs. And we look forward to having him back potentially in the spring and in the future. And before we get into the dialogue with Jonathan and Sana, I'd like to turn this over to our Dean, Matthew Shaftel, who is fighting the good fight for the College of Fine Arts every day at this challenging time. And we're really grateful for him. So, Dean Shaftel.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I really appreciate the introduction. And welcome on behalf of the College of Fine Arts here at Ohio University. Thanks so much for joining us for this incredible evening with Jonathan Freeman. And Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our students and in all of our programs, but especially our brand new nationally acclaimed musical theater program. Also, Sana Selemon, thank you so much for being here with us to be our gracious host. I will never forget my first meeting with a Disney villain. I guess I wasn't sure what to expect. Should I watch for poison in my glass? But what I found was someone who I could immediately pinpoint as a College of Fine Arts alumnus, an incredibly vibrant artist who is committed to ensuring that his work matters. Someone who is following our shared value of using the power of the arts to transform communities and to give voice to the voiceless. And on that note, we are really excited to announce the creation of our new Vibrancy Theater Fund, which supports a student-led theater focused on the legacy and future of BIPOC theatrical artists. Our Vibrancy Theater Fund was created through the philanthropy of our own faculty and has recently garnered the support of the Lin-Manuel Miranda Family Foundation. So we are really thankful that the Miranda Foundation has also supported an individual residency for one of our students who is sitting right where Jonathan was a few years ago. So for those of you who are joining us tonight, we ask that you might consider supporting the transformational work of our students and future superstar Disney villains. So Jonathan, welcome. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to the conversation tonight.
Thank you.
I would love to now officially introduce Sana Selemon, who is a BFA from 2017. I had the pleasure of working with and teaching this extraordinary actor in, I think, 5 classes and a production. I thought she was the most serious student we ever had until she started making me laugh every day. And I was like, who are you? Sana's begun her career in Chicago and has done some wonderful work already. And particularly exciting to me, because I'm homebound in Ohio right now, was to see her on 3 episodes of this season's Fargo. So Sana, we're really grateful to have you circling back into our lives as well. We've seen you at a couple of engagements with alumni, and very excited for you to be in a dialogue with the wonderful, delightful, funny Jonathan Freeman. So thank you so much. And I'm going to disappear in just a moment.
Well, thank you so much, Shelley, for that introduction. Really, it's quite remarkable. And to pass it forward, I will give hopefully the same type of introduction to Jonathan, as you might know him as the Disney villain Jafar, but he has done so much else with his time in theater and really in acting. So to pay my dues, you should really hear this bio. It's quite amazing. So, as you know, Jonathan Freeman is the voice of the evil vizier Jafar in Disney's 1992 animated feature Aladdin, but he's also been seen for the last 6 seasons recreating the celebrated role on Broadway at the New Amsterdam Theater. His other Disney on Broadway appearances include Admiral Boom in Mary Poppins, Grimsby in The Little Mermaid, and Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast. For the Disney Channel, he can be heard as a voice of Eli Pandaris in American Dragon, Vox in Lilo and Stitch, Dr. Somnambula in Timo Supremo. He also received a 1993 Tony Award nomination for his hilarious turn as the head waiter in She Loves Me. His other numerous Broadway roles include Roger Debris in The Producers, Bert Berry in 42nd Street, Pitkin W. Bridgework in On the Town, Mr. Brat in the 1996 production of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, as well as roles in Platinum and Sherlock Holmes with London's Royal Shakespeare Company. He's also been seen in New York City at the Irish Repertory Theater in Finian's Rainbow, the Manhattan Theater Club in A Class Act, City Center Encores in Little Abner and Of Thee I Sing, and at Carnegie Hall in concert versions of The Mikado and Sail Away. Now you think it ends there, it doesn't. Jonathan has worked extensively around the country in such prestigious theaters as the La Jolla Playhouse, the Houston Grand Opera, the Williamstown Theater Festival, and the Seattle Repertory Theater. Television appearances include roles in Too Big to Fail, Law and Order, Gossip Girl, and the long-time running series Shining Time Station for PBS. His feature films include The Hoax, also The Ice Storm, and he is proud to be a part of the 2017 Oscar-nominated documentary Life Animated, directed by Roger Ross Williams, which had its world premiere at the 2016 Sundance Film Festival. And with that, we dive into our evening with Jonathan. Jonathan, how are you doing this evening?
Well, thank you. My God, listening to that, it's amazing I'm alive, Sana.
It is quite the very impressive resume. And yet, most of us know you from this character Jafar that is seen in the animated film, but also the musical. So kind of to kick off the evening, do you mind sharing a little bit about where you were in your life and where that audition for Jafar came, and what was your relationship with the Disney movies and the villains up until that point in your life?
Wow, that's a lot. I have always admired Disney villains. I think from the time I was a kid, I think like a lot of people of my generation, a little bit before and since, you grow up on these animated features that often have a lot to say, and there's something about them that always grabs you. It's either the story, it's either the message, the characters, and for me, it was almost always the villains. I just loved them. You know, without a good villain, you don't have a good story. They are the gasoline that provides the fuel that pushes the stories forward and gives the hero something to push. So that was already in me. I always wanted to play a Disney villain. Okay, so flash forward. I did a lot of work as a kid and as a young adult, and playing a lot of, very, really, I would say, rather boring roles for me, because I only ever wanted to be, who doesn't want to be a villain? Come on. They have the best clothes, they have the best food, they all have the most fun, raising habit, and they have pets that talk. Who doesn't like that? So I was happened to be doing a new and a difficult musical at one point in my career that was called In a Pig's Valise, starring Nathan Lane. Reggie Cafe was in it, Michael McCormick, a lot of wonderful people, Ada Maris. And it was cast, that show was cast by a guy named Albert Tavares, a wonderful, wonderful casting director, and unfortunately no longer with us. And so the show was trouble. It was big trouble. And I even remember actually begging once to be fired from it at some rehearsal, and was convinced to stay. It was just one of those experiences. But this is sort of what people refer to as the butterfly effect, or the ripple effect. So a couple of years later, oh, by the way, that was the first show that I've ever played a villain in, thanks to Graziella Daniele, who directed and choreographed it. A couple of years later, my agent said, you know, I have an audition for you for the third film of a three-part deal that Howard Ashman and Alan Menken have with Disney. And for those of you who know a lot about Disney, you know that they are sort of partially responsible, at least, for creating the new golden age at Disney. They had been doing musical theater and had been musical theater writing partners for most of their lives, and were terrific people. I had met them originally when I auditioned for the original production of Little Shop of Horrors, which I did not get, but it was one of the few auditions rather, that I walked out of and I felt good about myself because they were so wonderful. They were such gentlemen. And I walked out of there and I thought, that was a great audition. I had a good time. They were nice people, you know? So anyway, all of these things, I tell you all this because 3 years later, I guess, after In a Pig's Valise, Kid Creole and the Coconuts did the music, by the way, for those of you who know them and know their music. They're hilarious and a lot of fun. 3 years later, I get this call from my agent, Diana, saying, I have an audition for you for the third film. It's called Aladdin, and it's for the role of the villain. What could be better? So, and it was being cast by who? Albert Tavares. So that is why whenever I am teaching, I say to my kids when they say, well, what's the most important thing about this? I say, everything is important. You have to pay attention to everything because you just never know. So I go into a room that was probably, I'm guessing, the size of your clothes closet for an audition. For my first audition, I thought, this is Disney? You know, it was Albert Tavares and my piano player and a reel-to-reel tape recorder because it was before digitally anything. That was my audition. I had a great audition. I walked out of there. I felt okay about it, and I didn't hear anything for 6 months. And 6 months later, I got a call. I had a callback, and I went to a callback, and it was a very different experience. I went into a room that was filled with, I don't know, about 12.5 people at one end of a very big room that was been draped for sound. It was very glamorous. They put a platform at one end of the room for me to audition, to stand on to audition. And they said, just do the same audition that you've always done. And as I started my audition, I saw 12.5 people at the other end of the room go like this. And it took me a while to process it. While I was auditioning, I was having a conversation with myself saying, okay, don't panic. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's happened. Your pants are still up, you know. And and then I realized, oh, they're listening for a voice. I walked into the room and I certainly didn't look like anything or any of the images that they had in mind for that character, and they just wanted to hear the voice. So that was my second audition. And then 6 months later, I get a phone call from my agency, and they said, Merry Christmas. That was in December of 1990. And in 1991, I was rushed into the studio right after the new year to start work on one of the songs that they wrote for Jafar.
I never grow tired of hearing that story. I think part of it that you really hit on was, I mean, everything is important, and in such an industry where everything that you do, everyone you come in contact with, they could be the next person that holds an opportunity for you, and not in a false way of like networking, but you know, when you make these connections, people remember you. So speaking about, obviously we have so much collaboration within the world of theater and especially within animation. What has that experience been like for you? Because I know that you have, you were raised rather with children's theater and really involved in these theatrical and creative environments. So as most people, I feel like we might know, you know, from our high school theater what that might entail, but how was it different going into the world of animation and seeing that there are departments and hundreds of people you see in the credits that have spent so many years of their life trying to, you know, build this film and make it into something that we can all enjoy?
Well, I am actually, you hit on something, the word collaboration. I'm very interested in the collaborative arts. I'm probably one of the last people anyway that you would see sitting on an empty stage in a black turtleneck singing songs for the evening and, you know, telling stories. Not really my thing. One of the things that I like most about the theater, and indeed about the other pursuits that I have pursued, such as animation and puppetry, is that they are highly collaborative. I enjoy that. I like working with other actors, with musicians, with directors and choreographers. I like working with costume designers, and I like working with lighting designers, and I like working with people that design props and shoes and hats, and I love it all. I'm very interested in it. It's fascinating to me. It always has been. Theater crafts is an amazing. They are amazing people with amazing skills that make all these fantastic things that seem like magic sometimes when you see them. And indeed, some of them actually are magic. So that's very important to me. So taking the step toward animation just sort of reinforced for me how important collaboration really was. It was sort of like doing a new musical, which is, anyone who's done a new musical knows it's like one step forward, two steps backwards, one step forward, two steps backwards. It takes a long time, an inordinately long amount of time sometimes, it seems, to put these things together, to try them out, to throw things away, to rewrite scenes, to rewrite a song that no longer seems appropriate for the character, for the scene, you know, however it goes. It's always a bit of a rocky road, but it's always an interesting rocky road. And the collaborative arts is very interesting to me. And so here I find myself in a situation where it's very much like doing a new musical, except there's even one more element to it, which is that there are animators, lots and lots of animators. And by the time that I went on to the project, I think I'm right in this. The animators had already been at work on that particular, just on that one film for about 2 years, because they spent a lot of time researching. You know, I would go to the animation rooms, and cubicle after cubicle, you'd see people under stacks of papers and things piled up all around them. Someone was just researching, you know, Middle Eastern food, and another person was researching Middle Eastern botany, plants, you know, animals, et cetera, fabrics, colors. It goes on and on and on and on. And that's very interesting to me. And also, I had a great relationship with my principal animator. Every character has a principal character, has principal animators, and there's many other animators that will also work on the same character. But my principal animator, pardon me, was a man named Andreas Deja, who is a terrific animator. You know his work. He's done a lot of other characters. He did other villains, in fact. He did Scar in Lion King, and I don't need to give you his credits. You look him up, you'll see. It's fantastic. I think Gaston also in Beauty and the Beast. So he was sort of famous for his snarky villains and sidekicks. So I got to be very friendly with him, and it was just a great relationship and a great experience for me, because I was in fact interested in all those things.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I think it's always nice to obviously hear from someone who is maybe new to the process or pulls back the curtain for us, because I know plenty of people who are joining us or will watch this might either be in the theater world or might have just encountered high school theater, but maybe they're not in the industry. And so kind of peeling back this curtain of, you know, what does it actually look like? And it's also so reflected in, you know, today's climate of, we know Broadway is dark, and it's not just the actors who are out of work. There are stage managers, there are designers, there are producers, the ticketing agents, your ushers. So there are so many layers that create these wonderful things that we get to see. And I think so much of the magic is that we don't actually see any of it. If they did their job right, you don't have to notice that, like, oh, like that was like, I don't know what happened there. I'm not a theater, technician or whatever, but like that scene change looked a little off. Maybe someone's not doing their job right. So it's so welcoming to hear that process was, I guess, so fulfilling for you. And I just want to remind people that if they have any questions, we will start to answer some questions in about 10 minutes or so. There should be a little Q&A chat place that you can type in your questions, and we'll see if we can get to them.
Sure.
But moving along to obviously something that connects us is that we both went to OU. So do you mind speaking a little bit about, Shelley briefly mentioned it, but a little bit about what you've been up to with Ohio University, what this virtual residency that you've kind of taken on looks like, and how is that for you, that whole process?
Yes, well, we Ohio University and I, Matthew and other people there, Shelley, have been talking for, a couple of years about me coming and participating in some way that would be meaningful. And I feel like I have a lot to offer from my 500 years in show business. And so it was not so difficult to really think of things that I thought I could do and that I could help with, and that would in fact be meaningful and useful. It was just also finding the time, because I'd been working, and Broadway show schedule is very intense, 8 shows a week, and I'd been this particular one, the last one I've been doing, Aladdin, I've been doing we had just started our 7th year when the pandemic hit. So we had been making plans for me to hopefully take some time, take a leave of absence from the show, come to Ohio University, do some lecture sections, some question and answer periods, do some master's classes with the new musical theater students in particular. Obviously that couldn't happen. So they created this virtual residency. They said, how about this for a title? And I was like, that sounds good to me, And I will tell you that, the work that I was really excited to be doing it, to be participating, and really excited to be working with the kids. First of all, I say kids, I know they're young adults, but they're kids to me. It's good for me to know what young adults think, what they're thinking about, what's important to them, and what's meaningful for them to learn right now. I could already tell you, without naming names, that there are some kids that are at Ohio University, a lot of them, most of them, who know a lot more about the business than I did when I started. And I had actually been working in the business through stock and regional theater from the time I was a kid. So it's not like I didn't know what I was getting into. These kids know what they're getting into, apparently. And even the pandemic didn't seem to scare them too much. It's not the ideal way to work, and I'm very glad that I was able to do something that was meaningful. I'm not positive that it's something I would choose to do it virtually. It's just not something that would be my first choice. It was very difficult focusing on this little box and trying to help people make adjustments and wanting so much to be able to make an impact. I think it was good for everybody in the end. Well, you have to ask them, I suppose. From my standpoint, I thought that it was as successful as it could be, and in some cases it was very successful. I can't tell you how great it is to see the work that's being done and know that kids will still be walking out of Ohio University with training, because, when push comes to shove and you get out into the real world, you have to have something to hang on to when you're just starting, because you don't have a bunch of shows you've done in stock even, or in regional theater, or on Broadway or off Broadway. You haven't done a lot of film or TV. It hasn't happened yet. And so you have to kind of hold on to yourself. And the best way to do that is just to walk out of there with great training. And clearly they're getting great training. I'm not just patting myself on the back, I'm patting all of their other wonderful professors and teachers at Ohio University on the back too. I felt that they knew what was going on. And so there you are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always curious as to, I'm sure there's this large existential debate between whether or not the internet can be inherently good or bad. But one thing that is obviously, I think, something that is helpful, especially for this industry, because so much, I at least remember when I was trying to decide if this is something I wanted to do, there is so much out there on the internet these days that it did not exist. And so I don't know. I guess I just think about, what does that comparison look like of what that might have looked like, a century ago versus today versus even 5 years ago. So many things update and change with technology.
So
And
quickly too.
yeah.
I think
And
cuts a lot. I mean, it's in a way, instead of having to spend a lot of time just trying to find the research that you're looking for, it's a little bit more available, and just things being more available, it is a good thing. In that respect, I think.
yeah, I think
Not
the access.
sort of grasping at straws for too long.
Exactly. Yeah. Someone asked, which it's basically along the lines of what we're already talking about. How did you end up at OU? What did that path look like? Because I always find that everyone I talk to that is at OU or has gone to OU always has like an interesting reason as to how they ended up there. And so it's a great question to ask.
Right. Ohio University was on a short list of schools that I was interested in because they had a professional actor training program.
Hmm.
That's the reason that it was included in my list. My original choice, my first choice was actually to go to Boston University because I had some friends who had worked there and they were training with a guy named Bob Hobbs, wonderful acting teacher. Really, for me, I couldn't have imagined a better teacher, quite brilliant. And he'd been at Northwestern prior to that. And except for those two schools, and I think Carnegie Mellon, if I'm remembering correctly, Carnegie Tech, I think it was called then maybe. Those were the schools I was interested in. And I narrowed it down really to Boston because Bob Hobbs was teaching there. And guess what? He came to Ohio University. Like I think it was either the year of or the year before I was to start as a freshman, Bob Hobbs appeared at Ohio University, and it was one of the schools that I had an acceptance from. And so that's what I did. And believe me, because I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in Northern Ohio. And I really wanted to get out of the state. Not for good reason, just to get far away from my family and my parents. And they were wonderful parents, and I have a wonderful family. I love them all dearly. But I wanted to go away. I wanted to experience other things. I wanted other voices in my face instead of my family. So I thought that the way to do that was really to run as far away as I could. And Boston was the furthest place I could think to get to at the time, I guess, without leaving the country. And so it was like a miracle. I mean, it sounds hokey, but it's like something happened. It was like magic. It worked out. So that's how I came to OU. And I walked out of there with everything that I really felt that I could possibly have walked out of there with, except for that chair that I always was admired in one of the student lounges. I always thought about taking it, but no.
That would be the most OU story, really, if you did end up taking it. At least from my experience of people who went to OU, lovely people, but
like that now. I think so. I don't know what things appeal to you when you're between the ages of 18 and 20 and 21, I guess 22, that you think back and you're like, what was I thinking?
Exactly. I honestly think most of it's out of boredom. You're just like, there's nothing else to do. Like, at least maybe you're occupying your brain. Reminds me of like when kids kind of do something.
This was a great chair. No,
I hope you find it one day somewhere and you can have it in your life. Oh man. So, and then this moves us basically right along to what is happening in your life now. I know that you've mentioned before that obviously you and the cast within ALADDIN, you keep in touch, you guys talk, but what has that been like for you? Because I don't even know how many months we could be counting on at this point, but theater has not been operating in the way that at least most people get into theater for doing in-person live things. And for those of you who have never been backstage, it is not the type of place, it is in the collaborative effort, there are people everywhere. And so with any of these precautions, it is extremely hard to do as opposed to film or TV where you can distance and cheat these things. So the reality of it maybe not opening for a while is there. So we just kind of wanted to ask you, like, how have you been doing? What has this experience been like for you? And yeah, do you have any things that you just kind of want to talk about on that subject?
You know, I've been working since I was a teenager in theater and all through school and continued, and I just have never looked back and never stopped. In this last project, we were just beginning our 7th year. And before that, I was doing another show, and before that, another show. So for a very long time now in my adult life, my recent adult history, I've been working, and I haven't really stopped working, which I'm very grateful for. And I feel very privileged to be able to continue to work like that. And believe me, I don't take it lightly. So it was a shock to suddenly really just be shut down. It's 9 months, by the way, when you were talking before, I was counting it up in my head. It's 9 months. And there's no sign of it coming back anytime very soon anyway, next year, some point, but not right away. It's very strange, you know. Luckily, the production that I'm working on now is a Disney theatrical production, and we have terrific producers who have regularly created Zooms for the entire company to sign on to, so people can talk. They can talk about things that are going on, and they encourage people to contact them if they have needs, if there are things that they're having trouble with, because it's tough. And I want to tell you, I'm not worried so much about myself. I am very concerned about the young people in our company. And I mean, when I say young, I mean, we have people in the company who are as young as 18, and then they're kids in their 20s, and then even into their early 30s. And they are like, wow, we're in a big hit Broadway show, and it's a Disney show, and it's got a lot of weight behind it. And so let's get married. Let's buy an apartment. Let's have a baby. Kaboom.
Yeah.
So I know it's not easy. I'm at a certain stage in my life, let us say, where if I really wanted to stop, which I don't really just want to stop doing anything that has to do with the business, I could stop. But this is early in their career. This is going to be tough to recover from, I think. It's going to be very hard for them to. They will, I know they will, because the people I'm speaking of specifically are all brilliant kids. And I know that it'll happen. The business will return. We're not exactly sure when. And I don't think it'll ever be the same. When people talk about things going back to normal, whatever, normal is supposed to be, I think that's there will be a new normal, but I think the protocols will all be different. I think that the idea even of, well, there will be no more backstage tours, I imagine. There will be no more signing autographs at the door. There will be, they'll limit all access, I'm sure, for a very long time, in the beginning especially. Temperatures will be taken even once there's a vaccine, I'm sure. I think that this idea, this rather exciting and glamorous idea that we see in film and television, and we've seen in real life, of people going to a ticket window and getting a ticket and handing the ticket taker their card and getting their card back, and the ticket taker handing them the tickets, and then them taking the tickets and passing them out to their friends, and then handing their tickets to the ticket takers. How many hands is that a ticket's passed? I think all that's going to probably change, I imagine. Anyway, it's things like that. That's what I occupy my time with. Isn't that fun? I just think that the protocols are just going to change. It's just going to be different. A week before the shutdown happened, when things were kind of brewing, it was in the news, but not really. They said to us one night, if you're going to sign autographs tonight, we encourage you to please take a fresh Sharpie from the box on your way out the door. And after you finish signing autographs, please discard it in a trash bin on your way home. And then the next day they said, this is an announcement over the speaker, at half hour. If you're planning on signing autographs tonight, we're supplying you with cotton gloves and fresh Sharpies. After you've signed your autographs, please drop the cotton gloves in the waste bin that's provided, and we'll make sure that they're laundered and bleached for the next night. and discard your pens on the way home. It went on like that, and I thought, this is not going in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, hopefully, I think every business at some point has had to basically do this reevaluation of what is normal, what is, business as usual,
Mhm.
and does it work? Is it worthy to keep? So in a way, it's a lot of heavy lifting to do while everyone assumes that, we're on pause, but there is obviously so much
Indeed.
happening.
Indeed. From an audience's standpoint, people are like, well, I'll wear a mask. I don't mind, And then you have to kind of say, well, it's also about the actors that are singing and talking 6 inches from each other's faces. It's also about the orchestra pit of 35 people that are in an area underneath the stage the size of perhaps your bathroom, follow spot operators that are up in small cubicles in the flies, and fly floor men and prop people, and what happens when the entire company of 30 people have a quick costume change, and they have dressers and wig people and makeup people basically on top of them helping them. It's close quarters. It's very tight. And our theater, the New Amsterdam Theater, the glorious New Amsterdam Theater, is one of the most spacious theaters, and it still is very, very tight. So it's tricky. It's very tricky. All the air conditioning and heating systems are all being revamped, and all those theaters are ancient, So
Yeah. Hopefully, with all of the good comes something to balance it out. But I think we'll only, time will tell, basically. So at this point in our evening with
yeah,
Jonathan, we're gonna move on to some of your questions.
I see there's a lot
Um,
of questions coming in.
there are a couple, so we're pulling some from the chat, obviously, and then also when you signed up for this event, if you wanted to submit a question, we're also looking at those. So one thing I'm sure people love to ask this question, I'm sure, of you is there a role that you haven't gotten to play that there's a part of you that is just dying to play? And, if you're the person that you really wanted opposite, was being cast as well, or the production team was filled with people that you really love to work with, what would get you over there, and what would that role maybe look like?
I am up for just about anything. I hate to be vague about it, but first of all, the role that I'd really like to do is probably something that hasn't been written yet. I'm always interested in starting new projects. It's always nice to be on the ground floor. It was wonderful to get in on, Aladdin from the beginning. And it's always nice to be the first person to start in a show, even if it's a new production of something and you're the first company. Because you have a lot of influence and you have a lot of energy and support at the beginning. So that's really what I'm looking for. I'm dying to do something new, but there are a million parts that I'd like to play. Yes, there's a million things I'd like to do. Musicals, 18th century restoration plays, which are always a whole lot of fun. Yes, yes, yes to everything. I was recently asked to do a production of The Alchemist, but it was I was still under contract with Aladdin, and it was a great adaptation of The Alchemist. I was really wanting to do it, but I couldn't do it. Anyway, I don't know, just about anything. I am not. It's not that I am not careful about the things that I do, but sometimes it's nice to not be careful and just say, that sounds really interesting, and I have no idea what I'd do with it. Let's go.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
That's why most of us get into the arts. It's because something, you love
Yeah.
to experiment and try new things. And I started reading what is it, Leslie Odom Jr. He came out with a book called Failing Up, and it's been very interesting to read because obviously he has a type of career, but some of the things that he mentions a lot, especially if you are a younger performer,
Yeah.
is being able to fail, and to
Yeah.
fail marvelously, and to be okay with that, because he said the best thing he could have ever gotten out of a college, conservatory, is being free to fail, because I think there is, in the industry that it is, of people watching you perform and you feel like you're being judged in so many ways, being able to just forget about that and do what you want to do is liberating.
Absolutely. You want to be in the room with a teacher or a director that will allow you the room to fall flat on your face. And it's very important, especially when you're in school, because that's where it's safe. I mean, you know, once you get out into the real world, you don't want to be failing too much in front of people if you can help it. But it sometimes is a sign of bravery, however, people making big choices and taking chances, and sometimes it works. Sometimes people respond to it. But it's absolutely, in fact, when I teach, it's one of the things that I really, this is primarily when I'm in the room with people, but I think it's very important to let people know that they've got to let go of that.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit afraid sometimes that young people are afraid to fail in front of their peers. Do you know what I mean? They don't want to not fail. They don't want to seem foolish in front of their friends and their classmates. And so sometimes they don't take the big enough chances. And I think they have to be kind of pushed a little bit, you know, to get off of that. And it has to be the teacher or the director or the person who's at the top or the person who's in charge of the room to create that. It's really important. If there are any students listening, give yourself a break. Allow yourself the opportunity. I think that's great advice.
I have a not random, it is a follow-up question to that. Do you, because I love to figure out where are the differences I see between people who generally do, we'll say straight plays and musicals. I know there is always this, I don't think it's a true divide, but I think sometimes people assume that there is a divide.
Mm.
But I'm curious to know if you think that there might be less of a willingness to fail within musical theater because there is more of a structure in the way of choreography and having to hit your mark and having to follow the music that's written versus maybe being able to have more liberties with just a script if you are doing a play. Maybe it has merit, maybe it doesn't.
Well, I hope it doesn't. That doesn't sound very nice to me. I I don't think there shouldn't be a divide. And I guess it goes without saying that there are some people who will excel at some things more than they may at other things. But I mean, if I'm working on a musical, or if I'm working on just a play, or if I'm working on an animated character, or if I'm animating and voicing a puppet character, I kind of all work in exactly the same way. I start with the text. I don't feel like I have to recreate the way I work every time I go to work on a different character. That's number one. And I would like to think that when I go to work on a play or a musical, that I bring the same amount of energy and hopefully some intelligence into the room that seems important and desirable. And there should not be that's not, no. And in fact, there are great Shakespearean actors who are wonderful musical theater actors. In fact, I have always said, and I think it's true, that the best musical theater actors generally, of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but they have generally had classical training. It really helps. Classical training helps musical theater. It inspires you to play bigger, to feel larger, to use your lyrics in the same way that you might use big complicated language like Congreve, Wycherley, Shakespeare, et cetera, Patrick Page, if anybody of you, he's a fantastic Shakespearean actor and he's a brilliant musical theater actor. I could probably sit here with you all night and make a big long list of them, but no, I don't. I hope that's not true. I hope people don't. I think it's an old-fashioned concept, and I hope that it isn't a real concept, a real thing anymore. But I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I would.
They do musicals. Yeah. Oh, he's a classical actor. He can't do. He's not gonna.
I think.
I think that's. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've definitely entered more of an age of this multi-hyphenated artist, which is basically if you can do one thing and you can do another thing, you don't have to be pigeonholed into maybe what you've done before. And I think that even goes to when someone asked about, are there any roles that you'd like to play? Is that, of course you've played things historically of like being an evil villain, but I'm sure there are plenty of other things that also excite you. It's not always just like this one stop shop, but you have the same meal every day for how many years,
Well, once you get into a successful run, that's another problem. That's the same meal every day, and you have to keep enjoying the meal. That's your job, But that's another whole conversation, I guess.
This is true, yeah. We got a question asking about OU and if you have a favorite place on the campus or a favorite memory by chance.
Oh my gosh. Oh, there were so many. I wish I could remember the name. There was a wonderful, oh my gosh, I can't remember. It's just gone out of my head, Sana. Maybe you can help me. It was a sandwich shop, but it was somebody or other's bait and sandwich shop. It was very strange. And we used to love it. It was hilarious. It was a hilarious place. Well, first of all, the Green and what's the Galbraith Chapel,
Mhm.
friends of mine, close friends of mine were married there, and we all helped give them their wedding there. It's an extraordinarily beautiful campus. I originally was at Gammertsfelder Hall for like a quarter or something way down Jefferson Hill. Is it Jefferson Hill?
Yes, Jeff Hill, indeed.
Oh yeah. And then I lived in all kinds of crazy houses around town and, on campus and off campus housing. The whole experience for me was great. I wish I could have thought about this more, my favorite spots. I mean, my favorite spots were generally where we would go on our time off to hang out and just play music and have fun. Oh gosh, that's a tough one. I do remember that the spring, those of you who don't know, the Hocking River is not where it used to be. They rerouted it at some point. And before they rerouted it, which is when I was there, the Hocking River would flood every spring. And that's the reason that they rerouted, because it would cause a huge mess. But in causing the huge mess, it spread this incredibly fertile silt all over the valley. So the spring would come and it was unbelievably, startlingly beautiful. And I remember it was the first time that I thought to myself, there really is such a thing as spring fever. And I've got it. It was crazy beautiful in the spring. And it's when everybody kind of went wild too, I think, as I recall. But it was a long time ago.
I think that at least that spirit has lived on with OU. Spring is always a time a time of spring. Yeah, people act like there's nothing more to add, really.
Oh, also Miller's Chicken.
Yes, indeed. It's like it's so great when you if you ever get the chance to go back and the things that meant so much to you in a certain crowd, you see it again and it's like you're just really transported back
Really.
to like those specific moments. It's quite, there's some, I don't know.
At one point I was living in an apartment, I could take a shortcut through the cemetery over the over the road to Miller's Chicken.
Yep. Let us see. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more audience question. So this one says, hi, I'm 10. My parents went to OU and I was wondering if Jonathan made up characters as a kid. So I'm sure this could also extend to obviously your time being in children's theater, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were involved with theater well before, the age of going into college.
Oh yes, I started when I was about probably 8 years old. Absolutely, I made up characters all the time. There's nothing I like better. I have the photographs to prove it. The embarrassing photographs to prove it. If I had some right now, if I knew that you were going to ask this question, whoever you are, I would be holding up pictures now that would make you roll with laughter, ridiculous pictures. I could, at one point, at one point, I disguised myself as an armchair so I could be a talking armchair. And it was a fantastic disguise. I safety pinned 2 neckties, one to each corner of a big cushion like this. And then I tied the cushion on my head like this. So the top of my head was really square. And then I put a record album on my lap. Well, there's no record albums anymore. I was seated on just a plain wooden chair. And I put my arms like this, like an armchair. And we put padding over my arms. And then we put a big, like one of those Indian bedspreads, you know, a block printed Indian bedspread. They're so beautiful, over the whole thing, and tucked it in. And I looked just like a chair.
I really wish we had the photos to prove it. But your description is intriguing enough that I feel like it's not just made up on the spot. So I'll at least
no, that's a real thing. And in fact, this is really interesting. You know, a lot of the parts that I played in children's theater, because I did a lot of children's theater in Cleveland, not just the roles, but let's say the archetypes, the types of characters I would play, like fussy butlers and evil characters, and, you know, just whatever the nuttiest character in the show. Those are the same characters that I ended up playing in my adult life. So in a way, you know what I mean? So it's like, in a way, I was like, when I would get a script for something, I'd be like, well, I know what to do with that. I played this character when I was 12, you know?
you've done the preparation.
Yeah, I've been preparing for, 50 years.
There you go. See, and then you beat everyone else out of the room for it, I'm sure.
Well, practice makes perfect.
There you go. So to anyone who, I guess your real advice is start acting like a chair and see if you can fool people.
Absolutely. I often say, why waste good acting on the stage when it comes in so much handier in real life? If you can figure out a way in real life just to pretend to be someone else and get away with it, go for it. I used to do it all the time. When I was very young, my voice was always pretty low. And people would call our house. They'd say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Freeman." I'd say, "Hello." And they'd think they were talking to my father, and I wouldn't tell them that they weren't. Sometimes they'd figure it out because they'd ask me a question. I'd be like, not know the answer, of course. But yeah, it came in handy. I pretended to be my father quite a bit, I think.
Nice. Wow. What a tale. And I guess we will spend the last couple of minutes wrapping up with, these more, they're questions, but they don't really have like full stop answers. It's things that we always think about. So we mentioned on with your bio, you were a part of the film Life Animated, which is based off of a book by Ron Suskind, and it is about his son and how he started to engage with the world as a child who had autism through Disney movies. And so if whoever's listening, if you haven't seen it, it is on Hulu, and it is a magically crafted movie. If you get the chance to see it, I would highly recommend it. But because of
the director, Roger Ross Williams, is an Academy Award winning director, a documentarian. And so it's not, what didn't surprise me in a way that we did get nominated. And the story itself, which is what Sana is really telling you, is kind of a strange magical story that is like a real life fairy tale in a way. And you realize that these things do happen, and they happen all around us all the time, and truth really is stranger than fiction. Yeah.
And so with your participation in this film, and even more what we don't actually know is in Owen's life, really, you've mentioned it before, that you've gotten to befriend their family. There is a point in the movie that really struck me, at least, when the parents were talking, and they were talking about Owen, and they were talking about the idea of, who decides what a meaningful life is, because his life and what that might look like may not look like what everyone else and the people around him, his family. And so obviously during this time that everyone says like Broadway's on intermission or it's on pause, all of these things, these clever things we've come up to say, I'm curious to know like what you have gotten out of this time and what has kind of made your life meaningful, and potentially what do you see as a something that you'd like your legacy in the arts to be. That's maybe a lofty word to put out there, but I'm sure all of us have thought about it in our own way. But with your career, what have you potentially thought about?
Well, it's interesting that it took the business coming to a grinding halt for me and a lot of people to actually consider these things, isn't it? I mean, I guess you get very wrapped up and involved in your lives and in your work life, especially. And in the business, as I think you'll attest, a lot of your self-worth is attached to your work. Your business and your life become very much the same. I will say that it gave me a lot of time in the beginning, especially, to slow down and realize that there was a lot going on besides what I was doing in my life and career. And it's not that I wanted to put it on hold, but there was a moment when I live in New York City, but I have a home outside of the city. And for the last 28 or 29 years, I've had been in the same house. And every fall, I diligently, almost religiously plant somewhere between 100 and 200 daffodil bulbs. And this is the first time in 28, almost 29 years when I was able to spend more than 2.5 weeks at the house, consecutive days, except 2 times when I worked at the Bay Street Theater, but I was working. So it's, and this is the first year that I was able to see the thousands of daffodils that I had been planting actually grow and bud and bloom and go through their entire cycle. And it was spectacular. I was so glad that I had the opportunity to do it. Felt like I'd been given this opportunity, and so I better pay attention. We have wild turkeys on the property, and one of our wild turkey hens hatched 19 poults, I believe they're called, turkey chicks, 19 of them. I made a little movie of them running around. I've managed to find a place where I could get them. That really did it for me. That was kind of shocking to me, because I get inspired by a lot of things. It doesn't have to be a lot, and it can be something like being able to see the cycle of a daffodil. I hope that doesn't sound too trite or something.
No, not at all.
But you neglect a lot of things when you're working very, very hard and you have kind of tunnel vision. And well, we wouldn't be having this conversation now if I hadn't worked very hard, I guess. So, there's something to be said for that too. But that was pretty spectacularly eye-opening to me. It was like a glass of cold water in my face at first, and I really enjoyed it. I can't tell you that I don't want to go back to work, because I really do want to go back to work, as I think most people do, and I would like things to be normal again, and I don't know if they ever will be. And I hope that I'll be able to, go back to ALADDIN and have some kind of a natural completion with it that will be wonderful, and then move on to something else. I'm definitely not considering retiring, and I mean, why? What would I do? And I guess as long as I can still remember lines.
Yes. I mean, you could always be at this point, a turkey documentarian, from what we have gathered from tonight.
It is a great documentary, I must tell you. I'll put what's on a set. I'm pointing like this because in my camera, she's above me. Are you everywhere? Okay.
You're on my side. I mean, at this point, I really would like a follow-up email of this turkey documentary that you've made and this chair photo. So hopefully that's not asking too much, but
Well, it's always asking too much, but that's all right. You can still ask.
Of course, you see, fail big, people. If you're gonna go for it, the worst they can say is no.
That's right. That's right.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, really with that, we're basically right at 7. So wherever you are watching this, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us chat a little bit. thank you, Jonathan, for donating your time and being such a great, I don't know, person to communicate with. It's been a lovely time getting to know you and chatting, really.
Thank you, Sana. It's been lovely. You're absolutely wonderful. I've had a great time, and it's a very interesting experience, and I'm happy to know that we're doing something that has to do with our alma mater too. That's nice. That makes me feel good. I'm sorry we didn't get to take everybody's questions. I know there are a lot of them.
No worries. I mean,
if you mail them in to Sana or to somebody.
okay.
Okay, hold it. I know. If you mail them into somewhere, I'll try to answer them.
Sure, we can see if there might be a designated email address, maybe not my own, to see if we can collect these things, and we'll see if Jonathan might be able to answer some of them. Hopefully you had some questions answered tonight, and yeah, thank you.
Good time.
Pardon?
I said, hopefully they had a good time too.
I think if you look in the chat, they're all very they're very happy to just get to see you. So yeah, thank you to all the Bobcats, Bobkins.
They're happy to see you too.
Oh, of course, yes, they tuned in for me, indeed. So we hope you all have, you know, happy holidays. Stay safe, and you know, see you in the new year. Hopefully, it's a brighter and better 2021.
Indeed, and don't forget to dress up like a chair if you can.
This is true. Aha, we have the dean.
Thank you both so much. We really appreciate your time and just your generous comments. It was just such a pleasure. And thank you for everybody who joined us. All right, take care. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Nice to
It's
see
always
everyone.
All right.
good to see you.
Stay safe, stay well.
Yeah.
Sana, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Jonathan. Same to you. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Sana.